When you think of the ARCA Menard series, a lot of things come to mind, and most of them probably aren't the best. Most races feature very few competitive cars, inexperienced drivers doing inexperienced things, and of course, ARCA breaks. But the focus of today's ARCA video does not regard the current state of the series, but rather one of its iconic seasons, that being 2008. If you're a fan of ARCA at all, you've likely heard about or seen another video about the epic four-way championship battle in that year's season finale that saw the points leader and runner-up heading into the race of Scott Speed and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. both take each other out and allow Justin Allgaier and Frank Kimmel to end up 1 and 2. But arguably the most notable race that season, and the one that's been all but forgotten about, would have to be the Carolina 500 at Rockingham. And yes, you heard that right, 500 in the title of an ARCA race, and Rockingham in the same sentence. But it gets even crazier, trust me. You see, after hosting its final NASCAR weekend in 2004, the Rock went silent until the fall of 2007, when the 1995 ARCA champion and active ARCA team owner Andy Hillenberg purchased the speedway for $4.4 million. And although he couldn't work enough magic to get it back on the NASCAR schedule, he was able to get it on the ARCA schedule as soon as the next season. But tracks come and go in ARCA, just like in any other racing series. What really made this race stand out was its whopping 50-car field size. At the time, ARCA field sizes fluctuated greatly from a maximum of 30 to 43 cars, depending on track size and other factors. So the decision to put 50 cars on a mile-long track was certainly something. And why did this extraordinarily professional and dignified racing series allow for such an exception? 'Cause why not? Yeah, for my research, I could not find any reasoning as to why they allowed 7 more cars than at Daytona and Talladega, other than the hype of the return of such an iconic speedway. And all props to them for that, because it certainly made for an exciting race. The Carolina 500 was set to run 312 laps, or 500 kilometers, and will be the 5th round of the then ARCA Remax Series season. Heading into the event, Matt Carter topped the point standings after a winless yet consistent first 4 races, with the defending and 9-time champion Frank Kimmel sitting just 25 points behind. The would-be 2008 champion Justin Allgaier entered the race 3rd overall, while the 2 previously mentioned championship contenders Scott Speed and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. did not have the best starts to their seasons, as they came in 5th and 9th respectively. In the case of Scott Speed, I think it's also important to mention that this guy was racing in Formula 1 just the year before, and now was competing full-time against teenagers and old late-model guys in ARCA, quite possibly the biggest one-year downgrade in racing history. All jokes aside, none of these drivers were able to post the fastest lap in qualifying, as that honor went to the 17-year-old Joe Gibbs racing prodigy, Joey Logano. Fresh off a 5-win and championship-winning Busch East Series campaign the year prior, this would be Logano's ARCA debut, and already the rumors of him moving to the Cup Series in 2009 were spreading like wildfire. Other notable starters in the race that I have not yet mentioned included the 3rd and 4th place qualifiers, Justin Lofton and Michael Annett, in addition to Justin Marks in 7th, Austin Dillon in 10th, Jeremy Clements in 15th, and Ken Schrader back in 31st. Only one car failed to make the field, the number 81 Norm Binning racing machine driven by Scott Alves. And if you think for a second that these guys wouldn't go through any links to get to the track, please refer to Tom Hessler III and Daryl Basham's sponsors. But without any further ado, it's time to buckle up and get ready for 312 laps of ARCA madness at the Rock. At the drop of the green flag, Logano in the white number 25 Venturini Motorsports Chevy pulled right ahead of the other white car in the front row, the Roush 99 of Stenhouse Jr., and immediately put a gap on the field. Meanwhile, Stenhouse continued to drop back down the order, eventually settling out around 7th by lap 10. Also by lap 10, 2 drivers had gone behind the wall, both of whom were likely deploying the start and park strategy. Those drivers were Wayne Peterson in the 0 and Brandon Knupp in the 54. And in a tale as old as time in ARCA, there were multiple cars on the track running hardly faster than your mom's minivan, and thus the leaders were deep in lap traffic at this point in the race as well. But on the 11th lap, the general concern of the field would turn away from navigating 20 mph off the pace lap traffic and onto avoiding the massive pileup on the backstretch. Yeah, the 7 car of AJ Hendrickson just hooked right on the backstretch all by itself, and since this is ARCA after all, no one really knew what to do. The 2nd place car of Justin Lofton got into the back of the lapped car of James Hilton hard, and soon a thick cloud of white smoke pretty much engulfed the entire crash scene from the inside wall to the outside wall. With about 10 cars parked somewhere inside that cloud, and about 10 more coming into it, not every driver was able to get through to the other side without some damage. But perhaps the worst case of ARCA brakes from that incident came from our favorite F1 bus, Scott Speed, who you can clearly see came to a complete stop in front of the cloud of smoke before saying screw it, and trying to drive through it before it cleared up, destroying the right front of his car in the parked number 19 of Jack Bailey. So lesson learned, don't follow your friends off a cliff, or whatever the saying is. Anyway, somehow the only driver that retired from this crash initially was the source of it, AJ Henriksen, who was shown in a racing reference as having had clutch failure. Everyone else would return to the track at some point, however the two of Scott Speed would go to the garage later on due to his crash damage. Oh, and the Aaron's lucky dog would go to Daryl Basham, putting the anti-monkey butt powder machine back in the lead lap. You really cannot make this up. The race went back green at lap 23, which is just about the most disorganized restart I've ever witnessed. But you see, this was commonplace back in the glory days of ARCAs. Prior to the introduction of double-file restarts in 2014, lap-down cars were allowed to restart on the inside of the leaders in order to apparently give them a chance to race their way back into the lead lap. Trust me, there's a better chance of a UFO landing in my backyard right now than any of those guys racing back onto the lead lap. But regardless of what was going on there, it was all for naught, because the caution came back out just 2 laps later when the 57 of Brent Sherman cut a tire and made hard contact with the outside wall. At the time, Sherman, who had a lone ARCA win to his name, was in the middle of his rookie Indy Lights season for Panther Racing. He actually scored a podium finish in his series debut, but as it would turn out, that would be the only podium he'd ever score. His racing career wrapped up soon thereafter in 2009, although he returned for a one-off ARCA race in 2016, in which he finished an impressive 9th place at his home track of Chicagoland. But where I'm going with this is that the Illinois native will actually be returning to the driver's seat for the first time since 2016 this summer in the Xfinity Series. That's right, just a few days prior to this recording, it was announced the now 49-year-old Sherman will be piloting the number 28 RSS racing car in the inaugural Chicago Street Course race, and I am very excited to see how he'll do. As for further context, its last Xfinity Series start came back in 2007. Anyway, focusing back on the race at hand, unfortunately the damage Sherman sustained would be enough to take him out of the race, where he would join Jason Basham, who had retired from oil pressure problems under the previous caution. Logano once again took charge in the restart, and the race stayed green for the next 20 laps. Over the stretch of that run, Billy Leslie and his family-owned number 18 car made his way up to second, while the 23rd and 31st place stars of Matt Hawkins and Ken Schrader both managed to crack the top 10 and race up to 5th and 6th respectively. For Hawkins, this race was only the second of his career in the ARCA Re series, but already he was more or less expected to run up front, because the 20-year-old had won in his debut just a few weeks ago at Iowa. For any newer, younger fans in the audience, you might be wondering whatever came of this promising talent. Well, tragically, he would pass away early the next year from an accidental firearm discharge. And yeah, there's really no way to transition on from that, but at least getting it back onto the on-track action, the leader of Logano had a narrow miss in lap 46 when the 22 of Ken Butler III slowed up suddenly right in front of him when his left front tire went down. Butler, whose fender damage from the early race pileup caused the tire to get cut, was able to safely make it to pit road and back out before the yellow flag would fly again at lap 48. This time it was for the 35 of Ricky Sanders, who, just to raise Joey Logano's blood pressure even higher, got loose entering turn 3 and slipped into the wall right in front of him. The number 90 of Gabby DiCarlo also spun avoiding the incident, but because she must have lost control so comically late, her car didn't even get picked up in any replay footage. All the leaders would come down pit road for the first time, and though there was no footage of this incident, apparently there were some issues during Billy Leslie's stop.
But coming out second was the 18 of Billy Leslie, and amazingly enough, his tire carrier got hit by the 46 of Matt Carter, and it completely flipped him over, and he was still able to get back up, put that tire on the car, and they were able to come out second after that pit stop. Unbelievable, I guess, endurance by that kid to be able to get back up and do that.
Impressively, the 18 team still recovered to come out of the pits in third, right behind Logano, as was Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who won the race off pit road via a fuel-only stop. However, none of them would see the front row in the restart because 2 cars decided to stay out. The 28 of Michael Annett and the 16 of Justin Allgaier, both of whom had already pitted to repair damage under the first caution. But no minor setback would keep Logano out of the top spot, as just 1 lap later he would rocket by Annett and go on to lead the next 83 circuits. During which time there were 3 cautions for debris and single car spins. Debris from Gabby DiCarlo's car above the yellow on lap 64, as did the single-car spins of Donnie Kelly and Ted Olszewski on laps 84 and 95. Jesse Smith, driver of the Rhett Jones race number 30, would also have his day shortened after his engine expired on lap 62. Smith, who was competing in just his fourth career ARCA Rays, had great momentum entering the Rockingham weekend, as he was on a streak of back-to-back top fives, including a P3 just the week before at Kansas. Around lap 80, the five-time Daytona ARCA winner Bobby Gerhart began smoking heavily due to a ruptured oil line, but he was able to eventually bring his Lucas Oil sponsor number 5 machine down to pit road and avoid bringing out a caution. At the same time, one of the infamous Wayne Peterson cars, driven by Tim Mitchell, lost power and began swerving around just above the apron. Mitchell finally decided to at least take the car below the apron entering the turn, but was still positioned right in harm's way as the whole field was coming at speed just a few feet to the outside of him. Luckily, Mitchell was able to get it refired and rejoin the track soon after, but man, not much has changed as far as the antics of the ARCA 06 car. Anyway, settling back into a more orderly timeline when the race restarted on lap 100 following the caution for Ted Olszewski, the man with more laps than anyone at Rockingham, Ken Schrader, began his real climb towards the front. After already making his way up from his 31st place starting spot to 4th right before the yellow, he raced about as low as he could on the inside line to swoop by both Matt Carter and Billy Leslie to move up into second. The field began to settle out from there, at least up front, before the caution would come back out on lap 113. This time, the Cunningham Motorsports rookie Taylor Malsom came up in front of Patrick Shelta and nosed himself into the wall. Because of the checkup, the 45 of Michael Phelps right behind them would lose control and spin nose first into the inside wall, completely totaling his car. And no, this Michael Phelps has no relation to the Olympic swimmer. Back at the front of the pack, the pit strategy began to spice up a bit, as most of the leaders led by Ken Schrader opted to come down pit road, while the leader of Logano, Matt Carter, and a handful of others stayed out. Even on pit road, differing strategies led to the 3 of Jeremy Clemens coming out first, while Schrader, who put on 4 fresh tires, would end up restarting all the way back in 14th. But just a few laps later, Ken Butler III's day went from bad to worse when he got bumped into on corner exit and spun head-on into the inside wall. That was enough to finally put the Aaron's Dream Machine out of the race, but surprisingly joining him would be the 18 of Billy Leslie. After running the top 5 for most of the day and as high as second, his engine would give out and put an end to one of his best runs since his lone win back at Winchester the year before. On the restart, Justin Allgaier lost both second and third gear, causing him to drop from third in the line to the back half of the top 10. However, that wasn't even the full extent of his problems, as he apparently pulled a muscle in his arm earlier on just from battling the car and was in a good deal of pain. The leader of Logano was also facing some problems because someone had finally managed to close the gap on him for the first time that race. That driver was Michael Annett, whose much fresher tires were the key to running down the young gun. Annett had overcome a good amount of adversity thus far after going a lap down early on due to his involvement in a lap 11 pileup and getting forced onto an alternate pit strategy, but near halfway through the 312-miler, his fight had finally paid off and he was able to get the inside of and clear the 25 car for the lead. But Annett's reign didn't last long, as within just a handful of laps, the 39 of Matt Hawkins, with fresh tires as well, had also gotten past Logano and was able to move himself past Annett and put himself into the top spot for the first time that day. Meanwhile, Logano, who was approaching 100 laps on his set of tires, was going to be forced to have to make a green flag pit stop, thanks to an incident between the already heavily damaged number 20 of Justin Lofton and the 32 of Dominic Isola. He was able to come down under caution and remain on the lead lap. With about half the leaders following Logano into the pits, the field was once again shaken out for the restart. Both the leader and second place cars of Hawkins and Annett stayed out, but now landing up in third was one of Andy Hillenberg's cars, the number 10 of Chad McCumbee. Chad, a Truck Series regular with 2 career ARCA wins, had started the race in 21st, and after slowly making his way through the field all day, was running 8th prior to the most recent caution. If you're familiar at all with ARCA in its current state, you'd know that Hillenberg's Fast Track Racing is one of the most underfunded teams in the series, and still often start and parks at least some of their cars each race. And back in 2008, they weren't a whole lot better. The team had only recorded 1 win, which came in its founding year of 1995 with Andy Hillenberg himself and brought to that year's championship. But the difference between then and now is the cost of racing. Then, as long as the team showed up with a Gen 4 Cup car that didn't have any illegal modifications, they were pretty much set to race. So on top of keeping the costs low, this also kept the competition a lot closer than it is now. Sure, even then comparing the Rauscher RCR cars to the Fast Track cars would be night and day, but at least there was room for a driver to contend with just about any car they were given. And that's exactly what McCumbee did, as he was able to get past Annett with ease in the restart and began hunting down Hawkins for the lead. This wasn't the first time McCumbee and Fast Track had teamed up either, as he put together a full season with him back in 2005 before he moved up to the Truck Series. Then at 20 years old and an ARCA rookie, Chad put together the best results the team has seen since Hildenberg's championship campaign, with a pole, 7 top 5s, including a runner-up at Pocono, and 10 top 10s. But unfortunately for Chad, in this race, he didn't quite have the speed to challenge for the win, and would eventually settle back in 6th. But nonetheless, it cannot be overstated how impressive that was. One of those to get by McCumbee was a 25 of a Logano, who now with fresher tires than everyone else in front of him, was able to fly up from around 10th on the restart to take the lead from Hawkins with no contest in lap 174. Pretty much the next notable moment in the race came all the way on lap 208 when Logano got by Hawkins again. No, not because Hawkins had reclosed the gap, but because Logano just about lapped the field. With undoubtedly the fastest car in the field, on top of a tire advantage, Logano had a truly lethal combination against everyone else. And when the caution came out a few laps later due to another single-car spin from Ted Olszewski, the second-place car of Michael Annett was the only other remaining lead-lap car. And as there were no wave-arounds at this time, only the 39 of Matt Hawkins was able to get back into the lead lap thanks to the Aaron's Lucky Dog. But even he would have to restart at the tail end of the longest line, leaving just Logano and Annett out front, now both on new sets of tires, and a whole lot of lapped cars behind them. Still, just as before, Annett did not provide much of a challenge for the 25, and Logano once again set sail out front. On lap 247, the 9th place car of Jeremy Clements pulled onto pit road for what we would soon find out to be a blown engine. That, of course, would put an end to a solid day for the winner of the previous year's Nashville race, and he would go on to join Patrick Shelter behind the wall, as Shelter had faced the same fate while running in 12th some 50 laps ago. Then on lap 253, with Matt Hawkins on the verge of losing the lead lap yet again, the 11th caution of the day came out due to debris, saving both Hawkins and a 4th place driver of Ken Schrader, who would now receive the lucky dog. The debris came trailing out the number 11 of Brian Silas, one of the other Fast Track Racing entries, who before making contact with the wall was running 20th and 7 laps off the leader. Not much change in the running order before the next caution flew, again for debris on lap 273. But this time, pit strategy factored back into the equation, as with just around 35 to go now, Annett, Hawkins, and Schrader all came down pit road to put on their final sets of sticker tires, while Logano was instructed to stay out. Considering Logano also had a set of tires left and the 3 drivers who just pitted would still be lining up right behind him, I'm not sure what his crew chief Billy Venturini was thinking. But luckily for Venturini, Logano's car was so fast that he was still the fastest car on track, even with roughly 20 lap older tires than his competitors. While Annett and Schrader were initially able to get past Logano, once their tire advantage began to fade off around 10 laps into the green flag run, Logano tracked them right back down and retook the top spot with 22 laps remaining. With 12 to go, the running order still showed Logano and Schrader 1 and 2. However, Matt Hawkins threw his name back in the hat, getting by Michael Annett for 3rd when Annett got into the wall. In 5th was the final lead lap car of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who received the lucky dog under the most recent caution. Despite falling outside the top 10 at one point while battling a tight race car, Stenhouse's crew was able to make the right adjustments and get the 99 machine nearly on pace with the leaders. But as he was trapped a lap down for most of the later part of the race, and of course it'll line up at the tail end of the field prior to the most recent restart, he would certainly need a caution if he wanted to finish any better than where he was currently running. And luckily for him, right with 10 to go, the 06 of Tim Mitchell stalled out for a second time, but this time was unable to refire and forced out the yellow flag, as well as a whole lot of unwelcome stress on behalf of the 25 team. To pit or not to pit, that was the question Billy Venturini was facing with single-digit laps left. On one hand, Logano's still the fastest long-run car, even on his slightly older tires, but on the other hand, it took him more laps than what were currently left to get past Ken Schrader in the last restart. With either choice just about as valid as the other, Venturini trusted Logano could get past the cars of Schrader, Hawkins, and Annett in time, and thus brought him down pit road for one final stop. Joining him would be Stenhouse Jr., who also had one last set of tires, and would now line up 5th in line for the restart. This time, though, there'd be no lucky dog, because under ARCA rules, the availability of the award terminates when there are under 10 laps remaining. So it would be a battle between 5 drivers for the win. Schrader, the experienced veteran with wins in all 3 of the top divisions of NASCAR. Hawkins, the young gun, looking to win back-to-back in his first 2 series starts. Annett, the superspeedway ace who had won the season opener at Daytona and the previous year's Talladega race. Logano, the dominant driver of the race and the clear favorite up until this point. And Stenhouse Jr., the Roush Fenway Racing backed rookie looking for his first career win. Who would get the job done? Well, I'll hand it over to the broadcast for the finish.
Look at the 99 of Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
There's a 25 right there. Going to move to the inside of Matt Hawkins. That's a battle for second.
That was the restart of the race. Here comes the final lap. Joey Logano was able to get by the 52 of Ken Schrader. His first ever ARCA Re Series start. He is victorious from Rockingham Speedway.
Awesome, buddy.
And no, I did not edit that. As you can see, the timing of commercial breaks back then were somehow even more insufferable than they are now. But without that taking away too much from the race itself, it was Joey Logano who made easy work of the 3 drivers ahead of him and went on to win in his series debut, much like Matt Hawkins did just a few weeks before. This utter domination, coupled with his first career nationwide series win in Kentucky later on that year, truly sealed the deal to Joe Gibbs that the teenager was ready to go cup racing and replace the 2-time champ Tony Stewart behind the wheel of his iconic Home Depot number 20 car. Going through the rest of the finishing order of the Carolina 500, it was Ken Schrader who held on to a strong second-place finish in his own number 52 machine, while Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was able to rebound on his fresh set of tires to come home in third. In fourth was Matt Hawkins in his family-owned number 39, and rounding out the top 5 and the list of lead lap finishers for that matter was Michael Annett, the Bill Davis Racing 28. The first car 1 lap down in 6th was the 10 of Chad McCumbee, whose performance was certainly the most overlooked all day long, considering his subpar equipment. Coming in 7th was the RCR prodigy and grandson of Richard Childress, Austin Dillon, while in 8th and the last car just 1 lap down was a points leader entering and exiting the weekend, Matt Carter in the Clement Racing number 46. And finally, closing out the top 10 were Tom Hessert III and Andy Belmont's number 1 car, and the man who had won every series championship for the last 8 consecutive years, Frank Kimmel behind the wheel of the number 44 in his first year as an owner-driver. Other notable drivers who didn't get the finish they wanted included Justin Allgaier, whose transmission issues relegated him to a 27th place finish, 35 laps down albeit running. And the 7th place qualifier, Justin Marks, who struggled all day after collecting damage in a lap 11 pileup, and eventually retired with overheating issues en route to a 31st place finish. And there you have it, arguably the most unique ARCA race in the history of this series, between the return to Rockingham, the Cup Series level mileage, the modern era record-breaking 50-car field, and the wide variety of future NASCAR winners and old-time ARCA legends that made it up. But that's all I've got to say for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and if you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like these. For my next uploads, definitely expect more of the Worthy That Bad series, as it's not going away anytime soon, and I'm planning on making a lot more videos similar to the Rickware Racing one with other backmarker teams. So yeah, stay tuned for all that, but until then, peace out.